Sports. All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Saturday, October 5th, and the Longhorns are on a bye, so we don't have an immediate reaction show, but we do have a very special guest for us today, and we're actually going to do something a little bit different. We're very excited about it. He will actually be our second official guest on the show today, and we are jumping behind enemy lines. We are going to be talking with none other than Ryan Aber, the Oklahoman beat writer for the Oklahoma Sooners. He's been with the Oklahoman for 18 years. He's been covering the Sooners for 11 years. So basically, ever since Texas has really been in the doghouse and Oklahoma's kind of dominated, he's been covering the team. So, yeah, we're lucky to have him. We're very excited to have him on the show today. And Ryan, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great. Just enjoying the bye week a little bit and getting ready for a big one next week, obviously.
Yeah, very much so. And so kind of from an Oklahoma Sooner side of things, as Texas fans, we've always had Oklahoma number one on our list. I don't care if it's A&M. I don't care if it's Texas Tech. All the other rivalries, if you will, nothing lines up with Texas OU Red River Rivalry Week. However, there's a certain respect when it comes to the Oklahoma-Texas rivalry. Is that respect mutual for the Oklahoma side of things?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in the Oklahoma City area, following OU football. I've been following this rivalry since I was a kid, and it's definitely different. I think it's sort of similar to what you talk about. There's a lot of schools that circle OU on their schedule. Oklahoma State obviously being at the top of that list, but there's nothing like the OU Texas OU rivalry, depending on which side of the Red River you grew up on, and it is. It's just different. Now, it's a little bit different from. Say, I grew up in the era when OU Nebraska was a big thing. I think that was much more respectful in a lot of ways than OU Texas. If we remember the Commerce Street days back in the day and how rough things got down there. So there's still some hate there, but there's a healthy amount of respect underneath it.
Yeah, and I think that goes, from the Texas side. I've always had a deep respect just for the OU football program, the consistency they've showed, especially over our lifetimes. Texas is, as you know, in your 11 years, I think it's been a pretty lopsided rivalry. It feels like Texas is kind of back on the way up. Has that kind of changed the feeling in Norman? Do you feel like confidence is maybe a little less than normal with Texas starting to show that they're, possibly back up again as a football program, as opposed to the last decade where they've kind of been down in the dumps?
Yeah, I think that there's some, I don't know if concern's the right word, but certainly a little bit of trepidation with what Texas has built over the last few years, and especially with the string of coaches that they've had since Mac Brown left. That it was always, this is going to be the guy that takes Texas to the promised land, and none of them were able to until you get to Steve Sarkisian and the thing that they built down there now, and the dynamic has changed, and certainly the landscape of college football has helped bring that along. But you finally got a coach that you feel like you can rely on in a different way than the last couple. So there's definitely some questions in Norman about how you match that, how you catch up, things like that. And I think there's a lot of people who are really confident in what Brent Venables is doing, especially on the defensive side of the ball. There's a lot of questions about the offense that I'm sure we'll get into, but OU is certainly trying to play catch up, which is a spot that they haven't been in, for a long, long time in this rivalry.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I do want to jump into this year's game. And then we also want to talk to you a little bit later on, just your history with the Red River rivalry and some just big moments that you remember covering and things like that, and what that felt like for you. But for this year's team, where do you think Oklahoma matches up best against Texas? Do you think that Oklahoma can find an advantage? And what do you think Oklahoma has to do to find success and even win this game?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is they've got to get after the quarterback and force Quinn Ewers, who I assume is going to be the quarterback next
Yeah,
Saturday.
yeah. News has circulated that he is expected to start and play. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they've got to get after Quinn Ewers. This defensive line has been really, really good to this point. You just look at the sack numbers, the amount of fumbles that they forced, things like that. This is a different dynamic than OU's had in a long, long time, and they need to do that. They're a little bit battered up on the back end. They're hoping that the bye week will give them a chance to heal up in some spots, especially Woody Washington has been banged up. They lost Kendall Dolby a couple weeks ago, probably going to be without Gentry Williams again. So they still feel all right about things on the back end, but I think that defensive front is where maybe you could see them getting the biggest advantage in an area where they need to be successful in order to have a chance at pulling off this upset that would be pretty remarkable, because you look at the history of this series. This is actually something I wrote about in the Oklahoman, coming out, I believe, tomorrow, Sunday, that Texas has pulled off upsets with a wide margin in ranking fairly often. I think 7 times they've upset OU when OU is ranked 10 spots or more ahead of them. OU has done it once, which is stunning.
Yeah.
I believe 1982 was the only time. So they've got to take advantage of areas where they're able to, and I think you've got to force Texas quarterback and the offense in general to make mistakes in order for the Sooners to find a way to pull this one out.
Yeah, and you kind of talked about how there's a different dynamic in Norman right now. It's been all offense for some time there, and especially under Lincoln Riley. Now it's defense. I mean, this is a very good Oklahoma defense, one that I've watched quite a bit, and they are intimidating to watch, and that's why this game does scare me, and the fact that this game is always kind of fluky. But this is the best OU defense in how long would you say has it been since OU's had this level of defense? Because I can't think of the last time I thought OU had this level of elite defense.
Yeah, I think you go back to probably early on when Brent Venables was there as the sole defensive coordinator, not long after Mike Stoops left. Mike Stoops had a couple of pretty good defenses after he came back, but things got off track. Famously, obviously, losing his job after an OU Texas game. But I think it's been a long, long time. I mean, you look back to, guys like Gerald McCoy and Teddy Lehman, where this team for so long hung its hat on great defense, and then it just disappeared. And it certainly wasn't like that for most of the second Mike Stoops era, and they've just been trying to figure out ways to get back there. And it seems like now they finally got a really good defense. I wonder what it's going to look like as the season goes on, because, I think it's so much been predicated on sacks and forcing turnovers, whereas they haven't held teams to low yardage numbers. And you sometimes wonder, well, is that just a small sample size, and sort of get a return to the mean there? So I wonder just how good it's going to wind up being, but either way, it is significantly better than what we've seen in Norman in quite a while. And I think that's the one thing, if you're going to point to something to say, hey, OU's got a shot in this game, it's that defense right now.
Yeah, and I would totally agree. I think all Texas fans can kind of attest to that same sentiment when it comes to the defense is elite. It seems like it's kind of actually already ready to compete for an SEC championship. You just got to get that offensive side of the ball figured out. What is it going to take, in your opinion, or what you've seen close to the program, that is going to get Oklahoma's offense to that level? Is Hawkins the answer?
Well, it certainly seems like they found something in him late in the fourth quarter at Auburn, because he was a completely different looking quarterback. The offense looked completely different. Now, I know part of that is the way Auburn's playing defense, but he was able to take advantage of it. And Michael Hawkins' legs, I think, make him a little bit different than, say, Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold had a really good rushing game against Tulane, but wasn't able to improvise quite the way that Michael Hawkins Jr. is able to do. But I think the main thing that OU needs to do offensively is figure things out on the offensive line. And they've been just through a shuffle down there. I think 9 different offensive line starters through 4 games. Through 5 games now, but through 4 games, they'd had 9 different offensive line starters. And it's just been revolving door there, and they haven't been able to find any continuity. And the other thing is their receiver group. They haven't been able to find a guy who's been able to stretch the ball downfield. It looked like maybe Jaquez Petaway could be that guy. They found a little something in him late in that Tennessee game. They've been out without Deion Burks, without Andrell Anthony, without Jalil Farouk. They're hoping they can get him back fairly soon. And without those guys, it's been really hard to keep defenses off balance. And I think that if they're able to get that back, and if Michael Hawkins is able to avoid mistakes, which has been the biggest difference between him and Jackson Arnold to this point, if he's able to continue to do that, then you can see the offense pushing in the right direction at least. They still got some time to go, but and some significant ground to make up. But at least there's signs that maybe this offense isn't as bad as it looks.
And my background's kind of an offensive line. I played offensive line, so offensive line's always what I watch. I remember when Steve Sarkisian took over at Texas, it was painful watching Texas up front that for that full year, and then obviously he's rebuilt it. Now their offensive line is
Jake, you're telling me
to have all
you're telling me
players
you're telling me you didn't like the 250-pound offensive lineman for the under Herman. You didn't like the 200-pound guys playing left tackle for you.
I think when Sarkisian came in, he said, "Why do I have 8 scholarship offensive linemen and like 15 scholarship skill position players or something like that?" But for me, I think that's where kind of OU parallels where Texas was a few years ago. Just at that position group, OU's much better at every other position group than Texas was that year. But what do you think the reason is? I know you mentioned there's been a lot of combos. I know there's been some injuries, but other than that, is there anything that you've noticed that is the reason OU struggling up front? Do they kind of have a plan moving forward to get that improved, whether that be this year or it just happened to be over the next 2 to 3 years type of deal?
Yeah, I think this year it could be difficult. Now we'll see if some of those young players. I think most notably Eddie Pierre-Louis, who everybody is really high on here in Norman, but he was a guy who wasn't there, for during the spring, didn't get there during the summer, and has sort of been playing catch up since then, and hasn't been able to quite get himself ready to play. I think they missed on a couple of those transfers that they brought in. Michael Tarquin from USC, who played at Florida a little bit before that, has been pretty solid. But really outside of that, Branson Hickman has been banged up at center, hasn't been great. Fabechi Wiwu from North Texas has been, up and down. So they just really haven't been able to find any kind of continuity there. I think there's certainly talent both on campus and, lined up recruiting in the future. And I don't think there's anybody here that isn't confident that Bill Bedenbaugh will be able to turn around that offensive line, because he's done such a good job for so long in Norman at building offensive linemen. But when you lose 4 out of your 5 offensive linemen from a year ago, really all of them until Jacob Sexton took over late in the season, including mainly Caden Green, because he was the one that they didn't expect to leave at all, and then he transfers to Missouri, and I think they've just been playing catch up since. So I think there's some hope for the future, but it's going to be difficult to certainly play at the level that they played with that group throughout this year. But they can get a lot better, I think. And we saw some signs, I think, against Auburn that they can at least make some improvement enough to be able to take shots downfield in the passing game, and to hopefully for them be able to open some alleys for Javante Barnes and Taylor Tatum when he returns at running back, to be able to have an effective running game, because their running game to this point has been atrocious.
I want to preface something that you said earlier on when we were speaking, and you said there's a lot of people that actually in Norman feel like Venables is kind of headed in the right direction. They kind of like where the momentum of this program is at. Is there a scenario where I don't know, at least from the outside looking in, that the sky could be falling and that, Venables is on the hot seat by the end of this year, going into the off season where there's a little bit of doubt? Or are you more so on the side of, let's take the Jim Harbaugh approach with Michigan? No, he took his lumps, had to build the program in his image. It took a little bit of time, and then he finally got there and he got the program to where they needed to be.
I think as long as they can do two things, make a bowl game, because if they would have lost at Auburn, then that comes in question. And then I think you start talking about hot seat. And then the offense has to be heading in the right direction. And they have to find a quarterback to go along with that. If Michael Hawkins shows the signs that he's the guy long term for them, then I think that Brent Venables isn't going to have any problem. I mean, heck, you look at the schedule, the way it's laid out. They play, Missouri, LSU, Ole Miss. Then in the season, at Missouri, home against Alabama, and at LSU. That is a tough stretch there. And certainly if they can find a way to win any of those games, then things are going to be fine for Brent Venables and Norman. If they lose all those, if the offense doesn't show any direction, if they somehow lost to, say, South Carolina, which is their other SEC game remaining, then maybe things could get dicey. But I think it would be shocking to me if Brent Venables got to a point this season that he was on the hot seat, unless it goes back to that offensive question. Their offense completely falls apart. But I think at that point, it would more fall on the shoulders of Seth Luttrell versus Brent Venables.
And Jake, I know it's your turn. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off right here, but what did you think of the schedule release whenever you saw OU's schedule compared to, say, maybe a Texas's schedule?
Well, if you're OU, this is what you asked for. You wanted. I'm not sure exactly what the sentiment was in Austin with the SEC move, but I know one of the big talking points among OU fans was, hey, we're sick of seeing the same teams come in here over and over that don't add any juice to the schedule. The home schedule, obviously you're not having Texas on it at all. So you've got OSU every other year, and then usually a decent non-conference opponent that comes in. And the rest of the home schedule is like, nobody gets real fired up for Iowa State anymore. Nobody gets real fired up for Kansas State. And this is what OU asked for. So, they got Tennessee coming in with Josh Heupel and a fantastic offense. They've got, Alabama coming in later this season. And this is what they signed up for. So, buckle up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll comment real quick on what it kind of felt like from the Texas side of things when the SEC move happened. Was little nervousness, mainly because the Texas program did not seem ready. Luckily, that kind of changed, but I think it was kind of the same deal. Texas OU was kind of the only big game unless there was a non-conference game. If you look at DKR during that Alabama game, it was a completely different home field environment than when a Baylor is there, or when an Iowa State is there, or even when a K-State is there. And so, wanting more of those big games, you look at this year and Georgia's coming in the same week that the F1 race is happening. And I think South by Southwest is around that time. Yeah. And so it's just, there's so much more excitement now around these matchups. Even a Mississippi State coming in or going to Mississippi State, dealing with the Cowbells is more interesting to me than an Iowa State. We've seen Mississippi State be a top 5 team in our lifetimes. That's not so much the case with an Iowa State. But one thing I did want to touch on with Hawkins, and this is just, I have some friends who went to OU and I talked to them and see what they're saying during the off season. And I heard rumors, and this may not be true, and that's what I'm kind of asking here, is that Hawkins was actually really impressing all spring and then during the fall with practices. And a lot of people actually thought he might be the best quarterback on the roster. Do you think that was kind of the case internally, or was it kind of a surprise that he has beat out Jackson Arnold now and is that starter pretty much without a doubt.
Yeah, I think there was definitely some buzz around Michael Hawkins, and I'll be honest, when I first started hearing it, you're like, yeah, really, because we've heard stuff like that before, but it took on sort of late in camp. I think it was a really similar to the talk when, and I'm not comparing these two quarterbacks at all, just the talk about it. Really similar to the talk when Baker Mayfield beat out Trevor Knight, and nobody expected that. And again, I'm not saying that Michael Hawkins is Baker Mayfield or anywhere close to it, but the buzz was similar there. And I think to this point, we've seen why. The decision making of Jackson Arnold on the negative side, which is something that I think a lot of us thought that the bowl game decision making was, hey, that's just a freshman. He'll learn some things. Hasn't shown that to this point, that he was able to learn those lessons. And you just saw that early in the Tennessee game. But Michael Hawkins has been a good decision maker, been able to make plays with his feet, and been able to stretch the field in a way that Jackson Arnold never was able to. Now, Jackson Arnold, hits a big shot early in the opener to Jalil Farouk, and then Jalil Farouk's hurt and hasn't played since. That clearly has an impact, but Michael Hawkins has been able to make something with the same guys around him, largely that Jackson Arnold struggled with. So I think that certainly there's a little bit of juice there. It's just surprising that we've seen that sort of proven correct as quickly as we have.
And so I kind of want to switch gears a little bit. You've been at the Oklahoman for 18 years. You've been covering the Sooners for 11 of those years. You've seen some of the best Oklahoma football, in program history come through, as whether it be Heisman Trophy winners, whether that be the Lincoln Riley offense, and even a little bit of his brisket, some would say. And so, what were some of the best, greatest memories, whether that be, Red River rivalry? What were some of the moments that stood out to you just with your time being there covering the team?
Yeah, it's been some fantastic ones. And, the first game that I covered work-wise was actually before I got to the Oklahoman way back in 1999. So I've been covering OU Texas games for a long, long time and seen some great ones. But I think you've got to start with the 2020 game, the 4 overtime game, and everything that went along with that. I think you talk about, most of these will be sort of skewed on the OU side, just because those are the memories that stand out as far as covering OU. Because I don't root for teams, but it's a whole lot easier to write stories when the team that you're covering wins and the guys that you're talking to are happy.
The coaches tend to give you a little bit more.
Yeah. So you think about the Caleb Williams game, you think about the Superman play, obviously, and then on the Texas side, you think about the Case McCoy game, where OU was able, or Texas was able to pull off that with David Ash hurt and pull off that upset. You think about just Sam Ehlinger and the performances that he put on over the course of the rivalry, and just all kinds of fantastic games. It's crazy. Last year I put together a list of the top OU Texas games in the Big 12 era, and a lot of them, I think of the top 10, half of them at least were in the last 10 years, and several just in the last few. It is a rivalry that somehow always produces fantastic games, whether it's performances or just storylines, everything like that. And who knows what we'll have next Saturday, if we could have another one that goes right up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year a lot of Texas fans were a little overconfident heading into that game, and then were a little bit shocked when Dylan Gabriel was kind of running all over the place. And I know that's something whenever I saw Hawkins take his first snaps against Tennessee, I was kind of immediately like, I texted Tanner actually. I was like, I think OU might have just found their quarterback. You could just tell it's a little different. You know, he was getting the ball out faster. The decision making was better. And then the fact that he is so fast. I mean, that touchdown scramble against Auburn, I saw that he was clocked at I think he was 1 or 2 for the fastest player of the week recorded. And so that just brings a different dynamic than a Jackson Arnold does. And I know that when I think about Texas OU, it's hard for me to really think about the past decade because those moments all include Texas having to pull off some upset because Texas wasn't good. I think about the Colt McCoy days, you know, when OU was top 10, Texas was top 10, and at least from the Texas side, and I'm curious to hear this from the OU side, is I think the Red River game should always be, the goal should be Texas and OU should both be undefeated going into it. Both should be top 10 teams. I always want OU to be to that level going into this game because I think this game should always be on the national spotlight. I think it's the best rivalry in sports. I've been lucky enough to go to it once, and the environment is unreal. Does OU, do you think that's kind of the same sentiment on the OU side, that they want this to be, you know, one of the biggest regular season games of the year, just from the entire national perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think OU fans want Texas to be as good as possible so they can beat them and revel in that. But
Yep.
also, I'm right there with you. The environment is unlike any in college football. I think to me, there's only 2 rivalry games that can make an argument for the best in college football. And I know some Michigan fans are going to hate me. Michigan and Ohio State fans are going to hate me. I know some Alabama and Auburn fans are going to hate me. But it's OU Texas, Texas OU, or Army Navy, because of how different they are from anything else. And apologies to Florida and Georgia. It's a great rivalry, but the atmosphere isn't quite the same as when you're in the middle of the state fair and it's, you know, split right down the middle and everything that goes there. So I think that it's a fantastic rivalry no matter what the teams are ranked. But when they're, you know, top 5, top 10 going against each other undefeated in early October, it sort of takes on the feel of an early playoff game. And there's been a lot of those over the last 20 or so years, 25 years or whatever I've been around. And, you would imagine that there's going to be some more here before too long, the way that Texas is built and the way that, certainly OU is hoping to head under Brent Venables.
All right, my last question for you is: has there been a player for Texas that you just hated going up against? You're just like, again, we gotta go up against this guy. One player that I always felt I loved him wearing the burnt orange and white, whether it be Jackson Shipley or Jordan Shipley. They both wore number 8. They were both essentially the same player, and they both played there for 4 years. So it was like an 8-year span of having a Shipley wearing number 8, just kind of running the slot in the middle of the field. I always felt like for opposing teams, he was the most annoying, frustrating player to go up against, or those two brothers were. Is there a guy that you just, every single season that you guys were slated, or once he graduated, you were just like, oh, thank God he's gone?
Yeah, I think, certainly those guys. I think more of maybe Jordan in that regard than Jackson, but both of them were sort of along those lines. I think about some of the old days and guys like Peter Gardier and things like that. But even the newer one, a guy that didn't have a ton of success actually. Well, I guess beat OU a couple of times, but once, I guess, didn't have much success beating them on the field, but always seemed to just put in great performances against the Sooners, is Sam Ehlinger. And the job that he did sort of across the board in those games, I think is one of those that earns respect regardless of the side. But yeah, one of those guys that you're like, gosh, this guy's he's still there. He's not done yet.
God, how long is he going to play?
That's Danny Stuntsman, right? Or I might be saying that wrong, but man, he's been there for 20 years. I'm ready for him to graduate and be done. It feels like every year against Texas, he just plays at a different level, and he's already an All-American type player.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that I think there are always a few on each side, mostly guys who either grew up in OU hating Texas, or grew up in Oklahoma hating Texas, or grew up in Texas surrounded by Longhorn fans and want to go home and prove a point. But those guys that take this rivalry personally in a way that I think fans embrace because they take it personally, and in a way that the other side respects because they understand that feeling. And I think Danny Stutzman is one of those guys. He's not from Oklahoma or Texas, a Florida kid, but sort of has that. I'd say it's like Brian Bosworth DNA for him. That one, a tough physical linebacker who makes plays all over the field, but two, just that attitude and that swagger about him. When the big game's on the line, he's the guy who generally, goes out there and makes a play. And, it's going to be fascinating to see how he performs in his final OU Texas game. So I know some Longhorns fans will be crushed about that Danny Stutzman won't be back for another year.
Yeah. Jake, do you have anything else, man? That's all I got.
No, I think that was great, and we definitely appreciate you coming on. It's great to talk to the other side because I have a deep respect for OU football, and I love this football game. It's my favorite football game to watch every year.
Yeah, it should be another fantastic one this year, and it will be interesting to see how it all plays out because, like I said, you never know what's going to happen in this rivalry. Unexpected stars, guys that you do expect just having monster games, things like that. So it'll be fun to see what happens next Saturday down in Dallas. But thank you all so much for having me on. Always enjoy it.
Absolutely. And maybe we'll have you on for some other reason. Maybe basketball season comes running around. But hey, before we let you go, do you without ruining any columns that you have coming out, is there a prediction that you'd care to share with us?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. I usually think about this Monday or Tuesday of game week. I'm gonna pick Texas. I'll say that. I do think it's going to be close because I think this game is close. A lot of times it's either close or a blowout. It seems like,
Yep.
and I'm not sure with OU's defense that a blowout is maybe likely. So I think it's going to be close. I think Texas finds a way to put up some points. I'm going to go with an early number. I'm going to go with 33 to 27. Texas over Oklahoma.
All right. So bet the OU spread, Jake.
If I don't bet this game, as I said earlier in the week, but if I was going to bet that 14.5 point spread is crazy. I would not touch that.
We both hate
betting
it
on the Texas side.
Yeah, we both hate it.
It's wild. We'll see where it goes, but I don't think it's going to be now. I mean, heck, Texas obviously has the talent to do it. But I think with OU, that the defensive line that I talked about, the ability to force turnovers, I think that can sort of be an equalizer in this one. And if they're able to get any kind of offense at all, then they can at least keep it tight entering the second half. So it should be a fun one either way.
All right, well, that's going to do it. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, man. We appreciate it. And have a happy Red River rivalry, man.
Sounds great. Y'all too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Jake, that is Ryan Aber with the Oklahoman. And, let me zoom out a little bit. That's a much better view than that was way too close. I was up my nose. But yeah, that is with the Oklahoman. We went behind enemy lines for the Red River rivalry. And, man, what a great opportunity that we had to speak with Ryan there. And, anybody who has any takeaways, leave comment. But that is going to do it for our show.
Be nice.
Be nice. Be nice. But yeah, we appreciated having him on. He took a very brave step stepping in to our realm of Longhorn Nation. So without further ado, this is All In Horns on Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. Remember, like, share, subscribe. These episodes come out every Tuesday through Friday at noon, and then Saturday immediately following the game for our immediate reactions. Give us an alert. Give us a thumbs up. We appreciate you listening. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
All In Sports Network. We love sports.